Welcome to On the Water and in the Field, Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program's news magazine show. I'm your host, Kim Barber. On today's show, we'll learn about living shorelines and how they could play an important role in coastal resiliency efforts. Then we'll hear from our Long Island Shellfish Restoration Project team about this unprecedented effort to improve water quality and enhance shellfish populations in our bays. We'll head out to see the big changes that recently took place at Old Ponquogue Park in Hampton Bays. Then it's over to Acobonic Harbor, where we will learn more about some innovative approaches to water quality improvement. Along the way, we'll find out more about our 2019 Back to the Bays collaborations and feature a spotlight on a very important campaign we recently launched in support of local horseshoe crabs. So hang on, and here we go. Hardened shorelines such as this have traditionally been used to aid in coastal resiliency. Living shorelines provide similar benefits but also create valuable habitat and protect the coastline in a more natural way. In our first story, we'll see what goes into designing and installing a living shoreline as we visit the Ponquogue Land Trust's Widow's Hole property in Greenport.
In 2012, the ExxonMobil Corporation gave the Ponquogue Land Trust 2.4 acres of land known as Widow's Hole in Greenport, Long Island. A conservation easement was also gifted to South Old Town and the village of Greenport at the same time to protect this property in perpetuity.
Well, years ago, this was actually a station that was used by Exxon to unload petroleum products. ExxonMobil started this program where they were gifting properties that they didn't have a use for any longer, and Ponquogue Land Trust actually acquired this. We were the first in the entire country as part of this program. But over the years, it faced a lot of erosion and invasive species issues on the upland, but on the shoreline, lots of erosion, just severe erosion, and that's what we're looking to address with this project.
Ponquogue Land Trust approached Cornell to help them with creating a management plan for the property originally. And then over several years, so this started back, I believe, in 2015, we went from a management plan to an actual shoreline restoration to try to stem the erosion that was occurring along the shoreline here. It kind of evolved into how can we protect the property from further erosion, at the same time enhancing the habitat value of the site. So Chris Pickerel and myself worked on a plan to create a living shoreline design for this property that hopefully will be able to help the property maintain the beach, increase the habitat value for animals, and also, maintain the aesthetics, the natural aesthetics of the property.
Cornell was significant in developing this living shoreline plan. And then once we had this plan in hand, Ponquogue Estuary Program did agree to fund this with $150,000. And then we went straight to the DEC, and they were very excited about it. And they basically looked at it as a great project and a scientific experiment. So we were able to do a lot of unique things on this project.
We had heard that it was an opportunity to help out a really important restoration project with Ponquogue Land Trust to restore this shoreline to more natural stage. So we decided to help Ponquogue Land Trust and Cornell out and fund this project and work with them to restore this shoreline and plant the grasses that we're planting here today, and also plant some spartina along the coastal area to protect the shoreline naturally instead of building a hardened structure here that might impact areas nearby and cause more erosion.
We got the contractor all lined up and set with us, and they started bringing sand in, and we quickly graded the beach. And then we just finished yesterday with the contouring and the final look in preparation for today's planting. So right now we're at the end of April. The end of April is the window closes for planting beach grass. So we'll finish off today or possibly even Monday with a little more planting. And then come June, when the cordgrass, the marsh grass, is all greened out that we have growing back at the lab, we'll bring that out here, set up other volunteer days, and we'll start planting from the water's edge, mean sea level. We'll tie it in with the existing marsh grass behind us that's here, and we'll plant towards the high tide line. And that between the cobble rock that we have along the shoreline edge and the spartina, the cordgrass, once it gets established, In case of storms, the roots will hold the sand and the stems will knock down some of the wave energy. And then if it surpasses that, we get a storm surge, then the beach grass roots will hopefully help hold this beachfront, this dune front. This living shoreline philosophy is really starting to take off in New York, and it's been used up and down the East Coast, and it's really gained a lot of acceptance. So it's low cost, very community friendly, and using volunteers, and it is proven to be very successful.
Well, the upland area will be replanted. We've taken all the invasives out of it. There'll be more of that to be done. We're putting up a nice friendly fence, a 4-foot fence with a pretty gate that will welcome the community. They can also walk along the shoreline, but it's more of a passive recreation preserve. It is not a park, but it's preserve, and we hope that the community will really enjoy it.
My husband Mark, who owns a fishing vessel Illusion, was coming home to Greenport. We would sit here and watch him actually sail into port. So we have a special kinship to this particular piece of property. It's very much cleaned up from what it was, and it is a big part of the village of Greenport to see it not become some waterfront enterprise, but open land for us all.
So this project is one of the first living shoreline projects in the estuary, and we are proud to be a part of this. We're hoping this project will give others, homeowners, municipalities, a really great example of what you can do to naturally protect your shoreline. It's also going to be very public, open access to the public, so everybody can come down here and enjoy the beauty and the function of this living shoreline.
It was a great experience working with Ponquogue Land Trust on the design and installation of the living shoreline, and we appreciate the support provided by the Ponquogue Estuary program that made this project a reality. We'll now move on to the topic of aquaculture and learn about the Long Island Shellfish Restoration Project.
The Long Island Shellfish Restoration Project is the first of its type and of its scale. It's actually a huge project, initiated in 2018 through the help of the Governor's Office of New York State DEC. And as part of this project, we're producing hundreds of millions of shellfish to put in local waters, both clams and oysters. The clams are single clams, the oysters are spat-on shell, which is something kind of interesting and unique in that most people think of oysters as the single animals that you eat, but these are clusters of oysters on shell, on dead shell, which works very well for creating reefs. So the sanctuary sites are spread throughout Long Island. There are 5 locations. I believe there are 3 in Suffolk and 2 in Nassau. And the idea there is that we put high densities of shellfish in relatively small locations, get them concentrated. So being that they are filter feeders, they'll remove everything that passes over them in the water column. So in this case, we're looking to remove algae and particulate matter and deposit it on the bottom or incorporate into the shellfish themselves. And these sites are situated in such a way that they're at areas of kind of marginal water quality, so not very good water quality, not very poor water quality, but between those areas. And the thought is that these filter feeders can act as a barrier, and as the poor water quality passes over these sites, it gets cleaned up. So we're expecting them to spawn over the years and contribute to the adjacent water bodies and add to both the recreational and commercial fishing industry, which is important to us. And that's effectively what we're trying to do. Beyond the scale of this and the science and the technology we're using, another thing is the human component. So we have a strong educational component to our project, which involves youth, but also adult volunteers. So we've produced many shellfish in the past, but never to this scale. And the difference here is that we have to expand our nursery areas, which we use what are called FLUPSs, floating upwellers. And in order to man those, we have to have staff members, but also volunteers. So we're looking for help on that. That's a good way to kind of integrate into the community, get people to understand the importance of water quality, the importance of shellfish, how the two interact. And we're looking to get more people on board. So we have workshops to recruit people to bring them in, to teach them how to help us, and to get involved and get their hands wet and their feet wet and everything else. It's kind of exciting.
The Long Island Shellfish Restoration Project has 3 goals, including improving water quality, planting shellfish to increase populations, and bolstering the local coastal community. So getting volunteers involved in this project is in that goal of getting the community involved and educating them about our local ecosystems and why it's important for us to protect it, and then also make our conservation efforts to preserve it. So in order to get people involved in this restoration project, I've had to recruit different local residents all throughout Long Island, as our sanctuary sites are throughout Nassau and Suffolk County. So by making materials to get the information out there to get people interested in, hey, maybe I might want to come out and volunteer for this project, and then get them in the door and then hook them that way through presentations and using models and hands-on experiences. That way they have some sort of positive interaction so that they want to be interested in going out into the field and giving us that hands-on experience we need. So we're looking for 2 different types of volunteers for this shellfish restoration program. One being a lead volunteer, in that we're looking for people to help us monitor the floating upwelling systems that are throughout all of our different sites on the island. Our team can't be there every single day, so it's important that we have people looking at these flupsies to make sure that the motors are running and nothing crazy is going on with them, and that way they can call us and we can head over there if there is a problem, especially in bad weather. And then the other type of volunteer we're looking for is a more hands-on general volunteer to help us with the maintenance of the flupsies. Now this is more of a dirty job, as we are looking for their help with cleaning the barrels that the clams sit in, sorting all the clams that are in there, trying to get the most optimal growth out of the shellfish as we can in this field season to have a more positive outcome in the fall when we do plant the shellfish into our local populations.
The new shellfish hatchery and everything that goes into producing the oysters and clams for this project is certainly impressive. If you want to learn more or volunteer, check out our project website, lishellfishrestorationproject.org. We'll now take a moment and learn about one of our Back to the Bays collaborations and see how specimens from our hatchery are being transformed into wearable art.
So the Back to the Bays jewelry line is a collaboration with CCE's marine program, and the inspiration behind it came from some of the species from their hatchery, and proceeds benefit the work that they do. The jewelry is produced in my studio in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn. This seahorse necklace was our first piece, and it was received very well by a lot of local customers at markets, as well as a few local shops. So I went back to Cornell and asked to see what other species we could work with. The other species that we've worked with are, we have a baby scallop, a sea urchin. Our newest project that we're working on is casting a baby clam. The process of taking a specimen and making it into jewelry starts with the actual specimen. It's pressed into a mold, wax is poured into the mold, and the wax is casted into precious metal. And we've evolved the line to include some bracelets, rings made from some of the scallops and the clams that you saw. I'm excited to be a part of this collaboration because I grew up on the east end of Long Island, pretty much living on the beach and the bay. It's still somewhere I go back to for inspiration, so this project was a really perfect fit. To learn more about the process of making this jewelry line and some of the new pieces that will be coming up, you can follow me at Manamade Jewelry on Instagram or check out my website, manamadejewelry.com.
The Back to the Bays jewelry line represents a unique way for us to raise awareness of and funds to support our work. Thank you, Manamade, for your contributions to our efforts. Now on to a story that showcases how one local community came together in an effective way to help make sure an important landmark, fishing area, and dive destination was preserved.
The devastation of Hurricane Sandy back in 2012 is still felt today. But through much hard work from local citizens, local town officials, and civic groups, progress has been made on the popular area known as the Ed Warner Old Ponquogue Bridge Park.
So since the late 80s, the piers did weather many storms, but in the 2000s when Hurricanes Irene and Sandy hit, it became necessary to either totally take down the piers or to renovate and rebuild them. Both options were on the table.
Around September of 2014, I got a phone call saying that, hey Barry, do you know that the old Ponquogue Bridge, which is 85 years old, because of Hurricane Sandy, the town of Southampton has decided they're going to remove the old bridge. That was a shocking phone call. I completely was in awe when I heard about that. So what I did was I got a team of divers together, one of them being a photographer, biologist that has been photographing what's going on underneath the Ponquogue Bridge for many, many years, and other divers of whom I put together and asked if I could meet with the town. I needed to emphasize to the town and prove to them that the ecosystem underwater underneath that old Ponquogue Bridge is without a doubt the best dive site along the shore of the entire Long Island. And the town was astonished as to what is underneath the water there. And in the middle of the presentation, the town supervisor, Anna Throne-Holst, looked inside the room that we were presenting and said, whoa, what's going on here? She had no idea of what was underwater, and she said, stop everything. We're not taking that bridge down until we do our due diligence and determine whether or not it really needs to come down.
The dive community came out and provided a lot of information, and they were so passionate about refurbishing at least the south side fishing pier to preserve the underwater marine environment. It was quite the education for me to see what goes on below the water and not look at it from a nuts and bolts perspective. This bridge pier has such an incredible habitat below the water surface that the dive community comes from out of state. It's really a tourist attraction for divers to dive under this area and an economic driver for this local economy. I felt very happy to change direction on this project.
So at that point, the town began working with FEMA, reconstructed the north and south piers with sustainable hardwoods, ipe, also green heart pilings, and they were open to the public in 2019.
It was a great show of people getting together and working through an issue and resolving it in a very positive way. The diving was saved because we didn't basically move any of the structures under the bridge. There's many very large rocks and habitat. It's almost like a reef system. It's one of the few, if only, walk-off dive site. The fishing from here is probably second to none because you have the cold water of the Atlantic Ocean coming in every 6 hours, and then the bays up in the headwaters are with the warm water and all the bait fish leaving, so it's a great fishing venue. It's a great site to come stand and watch a great sunrise or a sunset, so we got the best of both worlds here.
We have a dedicated fundraiser every fall for our water-related project of the year, and for last year's project we were wanting to do something local, and I called Kristen, our Parks Commissioner, and asked her how Rotary could get involved with something maybe related to the Parks Department, and she suggested a few projects, including what we're doing, which is so exciting, and that's the creation of interpretive signage here at the new Marine Park. So working with Cornell Cooperative Extension, and you folks have the science end of it and we have the funding end of it, and we're helping to make this whole project just more of what's shaping up to be a world-class attraction for the local community, our local school children, and the many tourists who are visiting this area now.
So this is going to go on for a long time. It's a gem that is just so superior to anything else here that these divers and everybody else, the fishermen and the boaters, really can utilize for decades into the future. So it was a tremendous success for the dive community, the fishing community, the boaters, and we applaud the town of Southampton for listening to us and following through on what they said they were going to do, and actually taking it so far beyond by getting all of those funds to rebuild the bridge and make it such a great place for people to go to.
I think the biggest thing about the Ed Warner Park here is it affords public access for everybody. Fishing, diving, kayaking, it's a wonderful area, and everybody gets to enjoy our local waters. And that's what the trustees really are about, preserving and protecting the maritime heritage of our town.
It's great to see people continuing to enjoy the old Ponquogue Park and the fishing and diving opportunities it provides. We'll be installing our educational signage on site soon, and we thank Hampton Bays Rotary Club for their support. We'll now head out to East Hampton and check in on the projects being conducted in Acobonic Harbor. There's been a lot of activity in the Acobonic Harbor complex over the past several years in support of habitat restoration and water quality improvement. The topic of water quality is a complex one, as there are many contributing factors that could lead to pollution. But luckily, there are also many new methods emerging to target and treat our local waters, thus lessening the impacts that excessive nutrients and other pollutants have on these systems. In partnership with the Town of East Hampton Natural Resources Department, we've embarked upon several innovative techniques to address the high nitrogen inputs being experienced in Pussy's Pond and Acobonic Harbor. We've partnered with them to help target the areas of highest inputs. From there, permeable reactive barriers to intercept and treat for nitrogen were installed, in addition to working on various methods of Phragmites removal and habitat restoration in this area. These various groundwater surveys, invasive species removals, and nutrient abatement efforts have been underway since 2014 and are making a positive difference to the health of the harbor, all while serving as a demonstration site for all the innovative pilot projects that are being conducted. Before any of this got started, it was important to learn as much as possible about the contributing factors to the water quality issues being faced in Pussy's Pond and Acobonic Harbor. In order to effectively target the source of nutrient inputs via groundwater, an extensive survey was conducted utilizing a Trident probe designed to help identify areas of groundwater influx. CCE's water quality specialist Ron Paulson and his team conducted the survey work.
And so we did that survey here of measuring the pore fluids, that are the fluids that groundwater is really discharging through. And we did that in the pond, and we also did that in the upper reach of the harbor here. And through that, we were able to identify several areas that had a lot of groundwater discharge with a lot of nitrogen in them, and were having a detrimental effect on the water quality.
It was clear that the best way forward was to target these areas of high nitrogen inputs. Guided by the data from the Trident surveys, several innovative water quality and habitat improvement projects were soon underway.
I came on with the town in 2016, right in the thick of things, and we've just been building upon this project with all the different multifaceted techniques that we can use to improve water quality and restore habitat in this area. So far, everything building together has been really successful. I think these are all different demonstration techniques that we can use in different water bodies around town, and really make a difference here while we're trying to ultimately attack the major source of water quality pollution in this area, which is wastewater.
We also partnered with Acobonic Harbor Protection Committee. They're very involved in the environment, and they wanted to help us further this investigation down here. So they actually made a sizable contribution, which funded additional Cornell work over by the Springs General Store in the Acobonic Harbor area. That funding helped us to move forward with, we still have a problem on the opposite side there, and we again teamed with Cornell to do a macroalgae experiment.
So on day one of the launch of the experiment, we brought all the seaweed down here. I had help from the town of East Hampton. A few folks came out and helped me clip the seaweed to the seaweed frames. We had a total of 30 frames, and each frame held 25 pieces of seaweed. We started off using mostly Gracilaria, but we did utilize ulva for the 3 intertidal frames, being that they would be more likely to be able to withstand the desiccation of being exposed at low tide. So the project was successful. We had very good growth of the macroalgae. It basically either doubled or tripled in size over the course of a month. We also had great results in terms of the nitrogen extraction. The most interesting results were the frames that we actually placed within the creek that drains Pussy's Pond, as well as the intertidal frames along the marsh bank, which were areas that within the Trident report did have the most significant amounts of nitrogen within the groundwater. And sure enough, the macroalgae had the highest tissue nitrogen at the end of the experiment at within those frames.
So this is all part of a multifaceted approach that the town's taking to bring together different techniques from Phragmites removal to stormwater remediation through bioswales and buffer establishment to demonstrate everything that we can do now, what can really make a difference to improve local water quality currently. And then the long-range plan would be to incentivize homeowners to upgrade their septic systems to remove that source of nitrogen and bacteria inputting into our water bodies. All of these projects can be expanded to be incorporated into the whole of Acobonic Harbor or have applications in other water bodies around town and on the East End.
We're thankful for the support and partnership of East Hampton, and the findings from these innovative water quality projects will hopefully continue to shape how we help improve the health of our local waterways. Since launching our Back to the Bays campaign in 2015, we've worked with many local businesses who generously give back in support of our marine environment in a variety of ways. For example, we're here at Rumba Restaurant in Hampton Bays, and this summer they are featuring a special menu item that generates proceeds in support of the work we are conducting out of our Tiana Bayside facility. Definitely check out the mango sriracha mussels when you visit Rumba, as proceeds from this dish will be donated back to the Bays. In addition to working with restaurants, we also work with the arts community. Each year, as part of our Back to the Bays initiative, we select an artist to design our campaign materials. Let's meet our 2019 featured artist.
My name is Allison Josephs. I am a graphic designer, I'm an illustrator, and I'm a painter. I went to Cornell University and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts there. And Cornell was just such a fabulous place because it was nature everywhere. I got involved with CCE Marine program because a dear friend of mine, Maureen Sullivan, who has also collaborated with me on some children's books. She was the author and I am the illustrator. I would go visit her in Southold all the time. I'd take my dog, we'd paint on her back deck, and we'd look out on the beautiful Peconic Bay. And across the way, she would point out and she would say, that's Cornell Cooperative Extension Facility. Flash forward several years, she says, you gotta come to Southold. I said, why? She said, we're going to drink wine, we're going to paint some buoys, and it's all for a great cause. And you'll get to meet the people from Cornell, from the Marine program. And so I went to this wonderful event that they were having there, and it was called Buoys for the Bays. I met Kim Barber, and she was so nice to tell me about the Back to the Bays program. And I asked her about what was involved with being able to be featured in the Back to the Bays program. And we talked a little bit. She gave me a fabulous tour of the facility. Fortunately, I was invited to create this piece of artwork, and part of the inspiration comes from scuba and seeing all of the underwater aqua life. And one trip I took to Sardinia, we weren't able to scuba, but we did do quite a bit of snorkeling on the rocky coast, and it was all eelgrass, and it looked like quite otherworldly, and just that beautiful vision of it waving in the water. And I thought that that would be a wonderful graphic representation for this iteration of Back to the Bays, this year's Back to the Bays program.
Thanks, Allison, for creating such vibrant original artwork in support of the Back to the Bays initiative. One of the species Allison painted is featured on the outreach postcard we produced to help promote the Horseshoe Crab Research Project campaign that we'll now learn more about.
What creature has survived 5 mass extinctions and is over 450 million years old? You may not have known it, but it's the horseshoe crab, and they need our help. Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program has been studying this important creature since 2006.
My husband Mark and I got involved about 14 years ago. We had contacted Chris Smith, who was running the Marine program at that time, and he introduced me to Dr. Matt Sclafani. And Matt is one of the leading researchers globally in horseshoe crabs, and he put us together with Pike's Beach and trained us to walk the beaches at night and has always continually over the last 14 years been an educator with us and with the groups that come out there.
The horseshoe crab plays a very important role in the ecosystem. Their eggs provide an energy source for migratory shorebirds and for many of the other fish that migrate on our coastlines. They eat the larvae and the eggs when they hatch. So they have many ecosystem services, and of course the reproduction is important for the horseshoe crab itself, that they sustain their own populations. In addition to that, from the ecosystem benefits, humans also benefit from horseshoe crabs in many ways. We actually have benefited from their blood, which we extract. Their blood is highly reactive to gram-negative bacteria, and it forms a very viscous gel around a wound or an injury on the animal. And what we've done is spin that around and use that as a diagnostic to test for contamination in vaccines or intravenously injected medicines or prosthetic devices. Because it's so reactive, it has really become the FDA gold standard as a diagnostic for detecting gram-negative bacteria contamination in all the vaccines and other intravenous medicines.
The horseshoe crabs are a very unique animal. They're used for bait, they're used for eel and conch bait, they're used for blowfish pot bait, they're used for biomedical, which is really important. I have talked to a few people in the horseshoe crab industry that are on the, basically the people that look at them and basically monitor them, and they're very concerned about the harvest of the horseshoe crabs. It's something that's been going on for 100+ years. I'm hoping that it'll continue to go on, but we need a balance. And if there's a way to make a bait that works better, more efficient, and you catch more, either more eels or more conchs, that's what the fishing's about. It's working smarter, not harder.
The first discussions of alternate bait kind of came with a conversation that I had with Ed Warner. Ed obviously has fished for a long time and knows the waters and wants to protect the bays, and he told me about the importance of the horseshoe crab. And Ed told me that 500,000 baits are used each year by 25 baymen, our local baymen in the waters, to use in eel and whelk traps. It's 500,000 baits. That's a lot of bait, and they're using a quarter of a horseshoe crab, and they're taking the horseshoe crabs when they're breeding, and they select for the egg-rich females. So you're taking something while it's breeding off the beaches. So it sets up this dilemma, and I said to Ed, we got to find a solution to this. There's got to be a better way. I mean, 500,000 baits is 125,000 horseshoe crabs. So this is why we got to Cornell.
My name is Emerson Hasbrook, and I'm a senior natural resources educator with Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program. I'm also the governor's appointee to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and through the commission, we manage marine species within 3 miles of the coast from Maine to Florida, and included in that are horseshoe crabs. So we've developed and implemented a fishery management plan for horseshoe crabs through the commission. There's interest in developing an artificial bait that has some horseshoe crab components in it, but utilizes other items as well to help reduce the harvest pressure on horseshoe crabs, and also to perhaps reduce the bait cost to commercial fishermen.
So this researcher started to wonder what it is that made horseshoe crab bait so attractive to the eels and the conch. They teamed up with some other researchers, I think DuPont was involved with that, where they actually broke down what it was as far as chemical signatures within a typical horseshoe crab bait that the eel and conch will go for.
Our plan is to enlist some local baymen to set their gear and use both horseshoe crab bait and artificial bait in a series that we develop in a scientific process so that we can get statistically valid results comparing the catch of an artificial bait and the natural horseshoe crab bait.
It's diversifying the bait, but it's also using a lot less of the horseshoe crab and making the fishery much more, it works much better.
We were hoping to receive outside funding for this through grant agencies, but we've not had any success. We've had good feedback on it, and our neighbors to the north and to the south and the other states have had limited testing on this. So we're hoping that you can make a contribution to make this possible so that we can run this research test and determine if we can actually make it a useful bait for baymen to keep them on the water, but also keep our horseshoe crabs healthy well into the future for generations to enjoy.
We're inspired by passionate volunteers like Gina who are continually donating their time to helping with efforts like this. If you want to contribute or learn more, check out backtothebays.org where you'll find additional information. For more information on all of our projects and efforts, visit our website and follow us on social media. That's all for our show. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the water and in the field.